Hello, Read 585, and welcome to week 13. This is the second week of our coaching unit, talking about coaching approaches. Before we get into the content, these are your readings for the week. First, chapter 5 of Elena Aguilar's book, Art of Coaching, which is on beginning a coaching relationship. How do I develop trust with a coachee? Which is the first step before you move into a working plan. Also an article, pretty short, called Room to Improve that gives you 4 different categories of types of teachers and how they approach change. And it also gives you strategies for working with those different types of teachers. So that might be helpful for you with assignment 3 as you think about what type of teacher is this and what tools can I use to approach them. And then lastly, from Elena Aguilar's blog, her secret coaching weapon, which is compassion, which is a new addition to her work that is not reflected in her Art of Coaching book. So she recently added the lens of compassion to her coaching lenses. Things that are due this week, nothing, hooray, but you should be working on assignment 3. Make sure you viewed all of the resources and materials and the scoring criteria, and you've started work on at least part 1 of that. All right, let's talk a little bit about coaching approaches. There are 2 objectives this week. First, identifying ways to build a positive, trusting, and committed coaching relationship. And then second, being able to actually apply these techniques to plan effective coaching opportunities. And the way you're going to be demonstrating this objective is through assignment 3, where you're applying the content from this week to that scenario. And then also in life as you go on to mentor and coach teachers at your site. So what coaching is not, and for the bulk of this slideshow, I'm drawing from Aguilar's text, the Jim Knight videos, the readings for this week, as well as a training I went to on coaching conversations. So coaching is not a single isolated event. It's not going to be effective if you just sit down and try to coach someone once. So, has been a big theme in this course is that it's ongoing, right? Professional learning and development is ongoing. It's continuous. It's fluid. It's a cycle. Coaching is not being the trainer in all things. That's consulting, which should hopefully take a lot of pressure off you, because I know a lot of times coaches feel like they need to have the answer to everything. They need to know it all. They need to have the solution. And that's not the case. You really shouldn't have the answer to everything. And that's what truly makes for transformative coaching, is the ability to work with your client to come up with a solution together, or to empower them to find their own solution even better. Coaching is not just, giving feedback. Let me tell you, what you did well and what you didn't do well. It's not a way to enforce a program. So, you shouldn't be the police of, Imagine It or Reading Street or whatever program you're using. You're not the police to go in and make sure that every teacher is on the same page at the same time in the TE. Coaching is not a tool for fixing people, and it is not therapy. Although when you do have these, trusting relationships with people, they're going to share with you, different things, but you need to be very clear about the purpose of your conversations. Obviously, you want to be empathetic to needs and be supportive, but you need to move them beyond, therapy there into actions that are going to improve their teaching practice. So then what is coaching? If those are all of the things that it is not, what is it? It is improving performance through changed behaviors. So through your meetings and your interactions, you're looking to get change in behavior from the teachers, which may take a lot of pre-work before you actually see a change in the behavior. But by changing the behavior, you're hoping to improve teacher effectiveness and student performance. It is the development of someone's skills and knowledge through one-on-one training. So when reading Walpole and McKenna chapter 10, we talked about how effective professional learning develops skills as well as knowledge. So just because I know that this, is true and important doesn't mean I have the skill to actually go and implement it. And just because I'm implementing something doesn't mean I know enough about it to support, some of the nuances that go behind how it should be implemented. Coaching should be goal directed. So you should be working with your client to come up with agreed upon goals. And your work together should really be centered and focused around those goals. So it's not, haphazard. It's not a mixed bag. I know when I was a third year teacher at the school site, there was a math coach, there was a reading coach, there was a principal, there was a lead teacher, and all of these people are giving me different feedback on different things. And it was really overwhelming for me to be at this new school site and to have 4 or more people giving me feedback on so many different things. And it's like, I would much rather, focus on 1 or 2 things, have those goals, make some progress there before looking at something entirely different. Coaching is a collaborative discovery process. So again, it's not a one-time isolated event, but it's a process that you follow. It's a good opportunity to provide outside eyes and ears. So I'm currently undergoing coaching cycles with my students in 581. So we did a pre-observation meeting. I observed them working with their student in their clinic sessions. And then right now we're doing the debriefs or the coaching conversations after the observation. And a lot of times I'll, say to them, oh, have you thought of trying this? Or did you notice this happening? And because they're so entrenched in the situation, they don't see those things or consider those possibilities, that it's just good to have someone on the outside being like, hey, what do you think of this? Not you need to do it this way, but hey, what do you think about maybe this? According to Jim Knight, instructional coaches partner with teachers to support them as they meet goals, usually through the use of effective teaching practices. So you're truly just partnering with them as, you're collaboratively working and assisting them with their goals, which are going to be based around effective teaching practices. According to the art of coaching, it's doing, thinking, and being. So doing a set of actions, holding a set of beliefs, and, making sure that belief is consistent with all, teachers can achieve greatness and not having negative perceptions of people, which she talked about a little bit, and then being in a way that results in those actions leading to change. Very poetic there. Good coaches have a clear vision of end results. So goal-oriented is a theme. What is the vision for the end? What's the target? Where are we trying to get to? They're able to use specific, well-chosen words. So when you go to meet with a teacher, you're not just giving them a laundry list of things to work on. Instead you might pick 1 or 2 focus areas, and you're thinking really intentionally about, how to bring up those areas. They listen more than they talk. They paraphrase what they have heard. They formulate good questions, and we'll talk more about that next week as we talk about coaching conversations. They empower the coachee to do, the thinking, because, we don't want them to be dependent upon you to give them the resources and tell them what to do. We want to empower them and build that skill within themselves so that they can be reflective practitioners on their own. Also, good coaches know how to break down performance into critical attributes. So basically making the tacit explicit. And I have a slide coming up on this, but one thing I love to use when coaching, I know last semester people emailed me some good tools for coaching, and I highly recommend Doug Lemoff's Teach Like a Champion 2.0, because each chapter or within each chapter, you're introduced to effective teaching habits, things like wait time, things like think, fair, share. All these things that teachers employ, but it gives you a common language for them. He has a scale of 100%, which means 100% of students are focused and working 100% of the time. And so it talks about different ways to get 100% and to know that you have 100% of students with you. And basically, it's a great study to do with a teacher because it helps you make, what you want them to do very explicit, and it lays out exactly how some of these effective teaching habits should be delivered. So here's the slide, basically adding on to that coaches are tasked with developing expertise in their coachee by moving them from unconscious incompetence. So, at the beginning of maybe a coaching relationship or implementing something new, they don't know what they don't know, right? To conscious incompetence, to maybe now I have some understanding that this does not look like how it should, or it's not going the way it should, to conscious competence. So now I am, consciously trying to improve this behavior or teacher action, to unconscious competence, to I am able to do it so fluidly with automaticity that it is just a habit now. Okay, so that's kind of the progression good coaches are moving their coachee through. They also make personal connections, right? You have to have their capturing kids' hearts says you have to have their heart before you have their head. Same thing with your coachee. They need to be invested in your work together before they're going to be willing to be vulnerable and make changes. The coaches focus little on themselves. This isn't about you and you being the best coach. It's about you helping this teacher however they need help. They also secure buy-in, but you want to be careful that it's actually authentic, genuine buy-in. As you'll read in the article, there's different kinds of buy-in. There's kind of superficial buy-in where, I'm going to buy in enough to not fully renovate my practice, but maybe, change a lamp or the curtains here or there. That's an analogy that's used in that article. So you definitely want authentic buy-in. Let the coachee choose the learning path, which was a key theme in the night videos, right? Giving them options, but then the decision is up to them which way to go. They speak with credibility. So, you should have some classroom experience, success that you can draw from, that you can use. You should be a credible, reliable source of information. Basic steps to good coaching: plan, do, check. So you establish a clear goal with your client. You define the gap between the current reality and where you're headed, that clear ending goal. You analyze the data, student performance data, teacher observation data, whatever that may be. You review and modify the goal as you work together. You identify necessary resources out there, and you develop a plan of action so that they can then implement the plan. Coaches grow, right? They help the client form a goal. They see the current reality. They help provide options to get the teacher to the goal. And then they also develop, they have the will to help that teacher and to motivate them. A couple of different types of coaching or approaches to coaching. So directive versus reflective. So directive is sometimes called instructive coaching versus reflective or facilitative coaching. Directive is all about changing the behavior. Usually there's some urgency behind this, whereas reflective, you build on changes in behavior to support someone in developing their ways of being and vice versa. So it's more than just changing the behavior, but changing the understanding behind it. Directive is strategies and solutions are suggested directly. So you need to do this. Whereas over here in reflective, they are generated through reflective questioning. So, tell me about this. Do you think there's another way you could get this result versus you need to do this to get the result? The coach assumes responsibility for the outcome since she made the suggestion, right? So all the ownership is on the coach because I'm telling you what to do to change your behavior. Whereas here, the responsibility and accountability are owned by the coachee since she is the one making decisions and choosing the direction. Over here with directive, the outcomes are produced quickly since answers and directives are given. Whereas over here, the achieved desired outcomes can take longer since the options and methods are explored to produce better results. So these conversations are a lot quicker than these types of conversations. And then lastly, over here, the coach acts more like an athletic coach, a mentor, a trainer, or a consultant expert who has all of the answers. Whereas over here, the coach acts more of like a partner. So there are different times when you might need a different style of coaching. So directive coaching, again, directives, tactics, strategies suggested for quick success. It requires that you can answer questions, give directions, impart information, and insist on a specific approach. The danger is overloading the coachee and creating dependency on the coach, or inhibiting the coachee's personal growth by limiting their reflection. It also overinflates the coach's sense of self-importance by making you feel like you are the expert who has all the answers. But when is it good to use this? Let's say the coachee's knowledge or skill set is lacking or exhausted in a particular area. I know when I was a regional coach, I was observed many times during my coaching conversations with teachers, and one of the observations I recall having didn't go very well because I was trying so hard to use reflective questioning. And this was a newer teacher, and they just did not have the experience or the knowledge to draw from. So it was just like kind of going in circles, where it might have been better if I said, could I give you a suggestion? What do you think about this idea? Which even isn't completely directive, but it's more directive than trying to use reflective questioning. It's also appropriate when the coachee doesn't have the experience to know what could be done, so they just don't even know what options to try. The coachee is lacking confidence. They don't appear to have a desire for coaching. The coachee is in danger of crossing ethical, legal, or professional guidelines. So if you observe something that's unsafe, you need to directly address that with directive coaching. Again, sense of urgency, emergency. Reflective facilitative coaching is raising awareness of the individual being coached in order to improve their knowledge and skill set. It requires the ability to foster empathetic and trusting relationships, ask open-ended questions, do active listening, which includes using wait time, checking for understanding, eliciting new perspectives, encouraging self-reflection. Vulnerabilities, asking too many questions, or asking closed questions that yield little information to build your conversation from, and then providing suggestions concealed as questions, or drawing conclusions for the coachee, or being led by your curiosity instead of letting the coachee truly lead the conversation. When to use this approach? When the coachee has the knowledge and skill set necessary, when you're trying to foster a deeper understanding, to coach high-performing coachees, to encourage coachees to take even more ownership for their continued growth and learning. And then lastly, we're introduced to transformational coaching in Elena Aguilar's text, which is directed at 3 domains. So first at the individual client and his or her behaviors, beliefs, and being, then at the institutions and systems. So this is more of a systems approach to coaching. So thinking about the department, the team, the school in which the client works, and the people who work within those systems, students, teachers, administrators. And then also the broader educational and social system in which we live. A transformational coach works to surface the connection between these 3 domains, to leverage change between them and to intentionally direct our efforts so that the impact we have on an individual will reverberate on other levels. So, basically by impacting at the coach level, it will extend beyond. And I know in Aguilar's book, she provides several examples for that. The coach also undergoes a transformation in transformational coaching. And it's only possible when the coach is engaged in a process of transforming his or her own behaviors, beliefs, and being along with the client. So if you're in that directive coaching stance and you feel like you have the answers to all of it, you're not truly able to engage in transformational coaching. All right, having a vision is very important. In our text, Elena Aguilar gives you her vision, which is very eloquently stated. Mine's a little bit more straightforward. I coach to disrupt educational inequality and to grow teacher capacity. You as well should have a vision statement, and this should be very clearly stated in your first part of assignment 3. In addition to your vision statement, you should be talking about your core values. So Elena Aguilar gives you hers. I did a similar process where, I started with the 10 words and then narrowed it down to actually 5, and then from there went down to 3. Jim Knight had his partnership principles, which are essentially your core values. He also had his 6 big ideas that effective coaching is not an either or. It involves complex helping relationships. People don't do a very good job of assessing their own practice, which is why you're there to be the outside eyes and ears. People aren't motivated by other people's goals, which is why you need to work with them to come up with their own goals. Knowledge transfer involves making tacit knowledge, explicit knowledge, vice versa. Talked about that. And then we usually need to see practices to learn them. So, model, demonstration lessons, etc. Components of coaching exchange. And Jim Knight goes through this. So you've already seen that, as well as these awesome focus questions, which if you didn't write down or make note of, I would definitely do that because these would look great in assignment 3. But starting with, on a scale of 1 to 10, how close was the lesson to your ideal? What would you change to make it, that level 10 lesson? What would you see students doing differently? What would that look like? How can we measure that? Should that be your goal? So that'll help them, develop their own goal so they can be invested in that, not your goal for them. He also talked about the helping conditions and the importance of choice, identity, thinking, and status, and how those conditions must be met in order to have an effective coaching relationship. Without trust, there can be no coaching. And what is trust? It's basically your client having confidence in your character and in your competence. So when you tell them, this conversation is between you and I, or here's my confidentiality agreement, they trust your character. When you say, I'm going to get this resource to you by this date, you need to do what you say you're going to do. And then also your competence. So how have you demonstrated that you are in fact an effective educator? So, character includes things like integrity, honesty, intent, competence, skills, abilities, knowledge, and attitude. And think of all the credibility and competence you have as a result of being in this program, all of that knowledge. 10 steps to building trust, and I'll give these to you, and then I have a few examples of ways I have done these things. So first, planning and preparing, being well prepared for your conversations and having a plan. As we saw that, reading specialist at Turning Tree did not have a clear plan for how to direct that professional, brainstorm, learning session, whatever you want to call it, and was not very well prepared to have these critical conversations. So definitely people are going to trust you more and be more apt to put in the time if you are well planned and well prepared. Another step for building trust is to cautiously gather background information. So just like at the beginning of the year with your class of students, you're trying to get to know them as people, right? Not just as students. And you want to be cautious not to be swayed or influenced by other teachers who may have had them and maybe didn't have positive experiences with them. Same thing with your coachee. You want to gather background information about the teacher, but you want to be cautious about how you do that. And the best way to do that is to talk to them directly. I know recently I was given a caseload of 7 teachers, and I met with the principal, and she kind of gave me a rundown on each of the teachers. And one of the teachers in particular, she said, this teacher was on an improvement plan and at another school site. and probably wasn't going to get asked back. And I took her on at this school site, and your job is to work with her. And so right away, I kind of, had like a nervous feeling about working with this person because I was like, oh gosh, she's on an improvement plan. Someone's already been working with her. What is going on with this person? When she ended up being the strongest teacher on my caseload, but whatever was happening at that last school site that got her on an improvement plan, I have no idea the context there. So it's really important not to be swayed by things like that. You also want to establish confidentiality and make it very clear. This is how I'm documenting our conversations because, I have accountability by my supervisors, and these are the things that I'm sharing with them. This is what that looks like. So if you're required to submit some sort of log or whatnot, be very upfront about what you're sharing and with whom. Very important step for building trust, probably pretty obvious, is to listen and genuinely listen. Practice active listening. Also asking questions, connecting to them on a deeper level, validating them. That goes back to Jim Knight's point about status and recognizing their status and expertise. I always like to give affirmations to teachers at the beginning of our conversation. Be open about who you are and what you do. Kind of goes with the confidentiality piece, but just being very clear about, your expectations for the relationship, the expectations put upon you by your superiors. Obviously, ask for permission to coach. Sometimes you don't have that luxury because you are told who you need to coach. And then lastly, keep commitment. So do what you say you're going to do. So just a few sample things. This is from like an initial meeting with each of the teachers on my caseload. I always have an agenda. Here's our schedule for today. Here's how we're going to be using our time. And I'll send it to them ahead of time. We're going to meet for 25 minutes. I'm going to stick to the schedule, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to share good news. I'm going to get to know you a little bit. Again, this was an initial meeting. We're going to talk about your PD and coaching needs. What would you like to see from me? What areas have you identified for growth? And then little closing wrap up. Gathering background and connecting. So in that initial meeting, I just say, tell me about yourself. Where do you live? Where did you grow up? Go to college? Tell me about your family, hobbies, interests, favorite snack beverage. So I can, get that for you if you're going through a tough time. And then anything else you'd like to tell me. These are interview questions taken from How Full Is Your Bucket, the one geared toward adults, not the children's book, but, what name do you like to be called personally and by the students? Do they have a nickname? What are your hot buttons, which is kind of misleading, but those are actually topics that you always love to talk about. So if I ask you about your child or your interest in stamp collecting, I don't even know, but the things you are very passionate about. What increases your positive emotion or fills your bucket the most? From whom do you like to most receive recognition or praise? For one of my teachers, that was her sister, actually. And so I actually developed a relationship with her sister and would always tell her sister about good things she's doing. Her sister was a hairdresser that I went and saw. So that kind of worked out conveniently. But you can read through these kinds of things, but mainly about how you like recognition. Be open about who you are and what you do. This was one of our initial conversations. Here's what you can expect from me, and here's what I expect from you. This is kind of a little forward, or I don't. When I used this, just as I kind of look at these, I was in more of a superior role, so I was actually their dean and writing their evaluation, so more than an instructional coach. Validate. So, these are some of those great questions to understand their background and kind of their history of what brought them to education. Another way to validate is, by leaving them positive notes. So when you observe them, your teaching brightens everyone's day, and then, writing down something positive and leaving that on their desk or in their mailbox. I'm thankful for you, and here's why. In the month of November, could do something like that for all of your teachers. Keep commitments. So this is actually part of, the note-taking template I use when I meet with teachers. So our next, agreed upon meeting date is this. These are your next steps before that time, and these are my next steps before that time. So these are commitments we agreed to. All right, that's kind of all I wanted to say about building coaching relationships and trust. You're going to be reading Room to Improve, where you're going to learn about teachers who are resistors, people who are accessorizers, people who are redecorators, and those who are renovators. And then for each one of those, they'll give you ideas for how to approach them. And I think the biggest thing with coaching, as is with professional learning, is you need to differentiate based on experience levels, based on teacher types, based on knowledge skill level. All these different things you need to be taking into consideration the same way you do when you deliver a lesson to your students. How is this student going to respond? Or what about my struggling reading, group of students? What are they going to be doing at this time? So be thinking of all the different types of teachers and how you're going to address them in your coaching and in your professional learning. And then the other thing you're going to be reading is Elena Aguilar's discussion of compassion, and she comes up with different ways to cultivate it, like slowing down, quieting your mind, breathing, being very mindful. I know I've definitely gone through conversations with teachers where in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about, where do I have to be next? What do I need for that? When am I going to get this done? Do I have recess duty today? Yada, yada, yada. And I'm not being very mindful of the person in front of me, their needs, and the conversation we're happening. So again, with coaching, it's not about you and what you need and what you got to get done. It's about them. They're your priority. Another way to cultivate compassion is spending a few minutes before the meeting, imagining what the client's day was like. I feel like that's a really good practice to put you in their shoes. And then that's the third thing. Put yourself in their shoes. And I like to think of the platinum rule. The golden rule is treat people how you want to be treated. Well, the platinum rule is treat people how they want to be treated, because that might be different from how you want to be treated. What is it like to be in their shoes? All right, so that was a little bit about ways to build a positive and trusting coaching relationship, things to think about as you're working on assignment 3 and you're building relationships with people at your site, whether or not you are formally assigned to coach them or informally, are acting in some sort of leadership role because of the fact that you are now an expert in the field of literacy. So I thought this was a good week to leave you with this quote, which is, those who challenge you most teach you best. And I feel like this is true of students and of teachers you might be coaching. I had one teacher who just, oh my goodness, I would kind of dread conversations with her anytime I had to give her difficult feedback. I knew she would be defensive. I knew she would ask a lot of questions. And so I would be really nervous and have like a pit in my stomach. And I would script out exactly the words I wanted to say and that I would use, being really intentional about word choice. And afterwards, I'd be like, oh, that didn't go as bad as I thought it would. But she just was always challenging me. And why do I need to do this? And what's the benefit of this? And what's wrong with how I'm doing it? And all of, those kinds of things. And so, but ultimately from her, I learned the most, about coaching and just about teaching practice in general. So definitely growth mindset. If you have a difficult person you're working with, think about what you can learn from them and how they can make you a better coach. All right, well, have a great week. As a reminder, next week is fall break. Hooray. So we will come back from that and we will wrap up our unit on coaching with just 2 more weeks of content, weeks 14 and 15, and then semester will be over. So hang in there. We're almost done.